Imagine, for a moment, that you are a mid-sized dinosaur living 75 million years ago in what will one day be the dusty plains of Montana. It is a sweltering afternoon, and the humidity is thick enough to chew on. You are thirsty, dangerously thirsty. You approach the edge of a wide, murky river that feeds into the western interior seaway. You scan the horizon. You check the tree line for a lurking tyrannosaur. Everything seems clear. You step into the shallows, the cool water a relief against your scaly legs, and you lower your head for a drink. The surface of the water is as still as a mirror. Then, in a fraction of a second, the mirror shatters. A head the size of a sedan explodes from the mud. Before your brain can even register the word predator, 15,000 pounds of bone-crushing pressure slams shut around your neck. You aren't being hunted by a dinosaur, but you are being deleted from the food chain by a Deinosuchus, the terrible crocodile. This is the biography of a creature that took the standard crocodile design, dialed the terror up to 11, and turned the most feared dinosaurs into calories. The life of a Deinosuchus begins in a scene of crowded, chaotic survival. Imagine a mound of rotting vegetation on a humid riverbank. Inside, 40 or 50 eggs, each the size of a large grapefruit, are cooking in the natural heat of decomposition. When the terrible crocodile enters the world, it is anything but terrible. A hatchling Deinosuchus is barely a foot long, a chirping, wide-eyed little lizard. That looks more like a pet than a prehistoric monster. But don't let the cuteness fool you. It is already a perfect killing machine in miniature. From the moment they scramble out of the nest and head for the water, the clock is ticking. At this stage, they are on everyone's menu. Large fish, giant turtles, and even their own older cousins. Survival is a game of stealth. The baby Deinosuchus spends its first few years hiding in the dense, tangled roots of mangrove trees, snapping at dragonflies, small crustaceans, and anything else it can fit in its mouth. It is a slow, patient start to a life that will eventually define the word excess. Growth for a Deinosuchus was a marathon, not a sprint. Like the dinosaurs that lived alongside, which grew at explosive, bird-like speeds. To reach adulthood in a decade or two, the Deinosuchus took the old-school reptilian approach. By analyzing the growth rings in their fossilized scales, which act much like the rings of a tree, paleontologists have discovered that these monsters were the ultimate practitioners of the slow burn. A Deinosuchus didn't reach its full, terrifying size until it was nearly 35 or 40 years old. Think about that for a second. While a T-Rex was living fast and dying young, the Deinosuchus was just hitting its stride in middle age. It is estimated that they could live for over a century. For 100 years, a single individual could rule the same stretch of river, growing larger, meaner, and more armored with every passing decade. It was the biological equivalent of a landmine that just keeps getting bigger the longer you leave it in the ground. By the time our Deinosuchus reaches its peak, it has become a nightmare of geometry and muscle. Let's talk about the hardware. A fully grown Deinosuchus could reach lengths of 39 feet. That's 12 meters. To put that in a perspective that makes your hair stand on end, that is roughly the same length as a large school bus, but significantly heavier. We are talking about a weight of 8 to 9 tons. It wasn't just a long animal, it was a thick animal. Its back was covered in osteoderm's bony plates embedded in the skin that were as thick as dinner plates and functioned as a suit of organic tank armor. Even the most desperate dinosaur wouldn't be able to bite through that. But the real star of the show was the skull. A Deinosuchus head was over 6 feet long, featuring a bulbous, rounded snout and teeth the size of bananas. These weren't the thin, needle-like teeth of a fish eater. These were thick, PEG-like bone crushers designed to withstand the astronomical forces of a struggle with a multi-ton dinosaur. Now, we have to talk about the bite force. This is where the Deinosuchus moves from scary animal into the realm of mythological monster. Scientists using computer modeling have estimated that the Deinosuchus could slam its jaws shut with a force of 18,000 to 20,000 pounds per square inch. For comparison, a modern great white shark bites with about 4,000 pounds. T-Rex, the gold standard of bite force, clocks in at around 12,000 pounds. The Deinosuchus didn't just outclass them, it nearly doubled them. It possessed the most powerful bite of any animal to ever walk the earth or swim its rivers. When those jaws closed, it wasn't a wound, it was a structural failure of the prey skeleton. It could crush the shell of a giant sea turtle as easily as you would crack a peanut. It could snap the femur of an Apalachosaurus, a cousin of the T-Rex, like a dry twig. The hunting strategy was pure, cold-blooded efficiency. The Deinosuchus was an ambush specialist. Because it was so heavy, it wasn't doing much chasing on land. Instead, it used the water to its advantage. It could stay submerged for long periods, its dark, armored back mimicking a floating log or a patch of river mud. It would wait for a dinosaur to approach the water's edge. And then, using its massive, muscular tail, it would launch itself forward in a burst of explosive power. The death roll, the iconic move of modern crocodiles, was likely invented by these giants. Once the Deinosuchus had a grip, it would drag the thrashing dinosaur into the deep water and spin its entire body with enough torque to rip limbs clean off their sockets. It was a strategy that allowed a mere reptile to take down the most advanced predators of the age. In the rivers of the Cretaceous, the Deinosuchus wasn't just a part of the ecosystem. It was the boundary line where life ended. But if it was so powerful, why isn't it still here? Why don't we have 40-foot crocodiles in the Mississippi River today? The answer lies in the western interior seaway. For millions of years, North America was split in half by a massive shallow sea. This created the perfect environment for the Deinosuchus. It's thousands of miles of warm, swampy coastlines and estuaries full of giant turtles and dinosaurs. But toward the end of the Cretaceous, the Earth's tectonic plates shifted, and the sea levels began to drop. The seaway began to retreat, and the vast interconnected swamp systems began to dry up or turn into smaller, isolated lakes. The Deinosuchus was a victim of its own success. A 9-ton predator needs a massive amount of territory and a constant, reliable source of high-protein prey. As the swamps vanished, the terrible crocodile found itself a giant in a world that was shrinking. By about 73 million years ago, several million years before the asteroid even arrived, the Deinosuchus quietly vanished from the fossil record. So, did it leave a legacy? Well, if you look at a modern American alligator, you are seeing a scaled-down version of the same basic plan. While they aren't direct descendants, the Deinosuchus was a separate branch of the crocodilian tree. The obligatory design has remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. Evolution took a look at the Deinosuchus and realized that while the 40-foot size was hard to maintain during climate change, the strategy was flawless. Today's alligators are the echoes of that ancient power. They still hide, they still wait, and they still use that explosive ambush. We live in a world of micro-monsters that are simply waiting for the environment to turn back into a giant swamp so they can scale up again. The biography of the Deinosuchus is a reminder that in the history of life, the most famous kings aren't always the ones with the loudest roar. The T-Rex was out there claiming the headlines in the movie deals. The Deinosuchus was in the mud, patiently waiting to eat anything that got too close to the water. It was the ultimate patient predator, a creature that lived for a century, grew to the size of a bus, and possessed the power to crush a dinosaur's skull like an eggshell. It was the terrible crocodile. A biological tank that proved that no matter how big or scary you are on land, there is always something bigger, older, and hungrier, waiting just beneath the surface. Long live the king of the swamp.